Hello, hello, folks. How are you all today? It's about time we get started, isn't it? I think I should probably turn the intense music off, shouldn't I? It's no longer time to be intense. We're just gonna slowly, manually fade it out real badly with the YouTube slider. My goodness, so hello everyone. How are you all? I hope you're all doing well. Yeah, no more tense for you guys. We're gonna just be chill. I'm gonna turn this up a little bit. Let me know if the tavern music is too quiet, too loud, whatever. Anyway, welcome everyone. I get to talk about D&D again. Ah! I am very excited to get to do that. Oh, that hotkey skips pretty far into the video, huh? I didn't mean to do that. My goodness. So, anyway, welcome 𝐷𝐷𝐾, and congrats on your first redeem. And welcome Scarlet. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, you resubbed with Prime. You've been subbed for 25 months? Holy shit, that's more than 2 years. My goodness. Sadie, you're doing okay. You get to draw land and a couple Halloween costumes at some point soon. Is that a suggestion? I mean, I was gonna terrorize you with Christmas sweaters, with ugly Christmas sweaters. But, you know. And Halloween costume. I'll just note that down. You know, just in case. Hehehe. I mean, you should terrorize me with Christmas sweaters. I felt like I had to. For context for folks, I reblogged an OC like outfit doodles request meme on Tumblr, and 𝐷𝐷𝐾 and Dakota, whom I play D&D with, managed to both request my character Tiernan in an ugly Christmas sweater and his partner Moiran in an ugly Christmas sweater. So that's a drawing I have to do eventually. Oh, goodness. So, yeah. Anyway, my gosh. I hope folks are doing well. I ran a little poll, and some people, I think everyone here is like kind of a session 0 D&D veteran. But yeah, it might have been coordinated, but you confirmed nothing. I kind of figured it was coordinated, to be perfectly honest, because I think one of you said "oh" and the other one said "ooh." So yeah, woo! Everyone here that's like spoken up that I know is here, kind of a little bit of a D&D veteran, but did he send it with an "oo"? I think so. I think someone said "oo." I'd have to go and check. Anyway, my goodness. So, what the hell are we even doing today? We're gonna be talking about what the hecky a session 0 is in tabletop RPGs, and why you should even have one. It's important. It's good and cool. So yeah, but before we get into that, little announcement. Next week, we're gonna be giving Kirby and the Forgotten Lands another shot. I still have not beat Ultimate 𝐏𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐶 with no copy abilities. So I'm gonna be trying to do that until I either get bored or I do it. So I hope you're all ready for that. That should hopefully be pretty fun. So yeah. I think we should probably get into the gosh dang presentation though, shouldn't we? Although I will say, it's a presentation, so if we finish up early, then we finish up early. I'm not in any particular rush to keep you people here for 2 hours like I normally do. That being said, I'm not gonna try to make stuff short. So yeah. Let's get this ready to rock. Let me get this. Do I want presenter view? No, I don't want presenter view. None at all. All right. And behold, it's session 0 time, baby. So welcome. If you notice, my model's a little smaller and I'm a little more off to the side, just so I don't cover too much of the slides. I went through and checked. I don't think anything important is covered. So, good things all around. But let's freaking hop into it. I said let's hop into it. Okay, it really wants me to click to do the next button. So, kind of an overview of the stream. So we're gonna go into what is a session 0, why you should have a session 0, and this is sort of the meatiest section. We're gonna do like a session 0 checklist of like, this is the stuff you should talk about in one, because that's honestly like the hardest thing. Once you know what a session 0 is and why you should have one, you're like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And then you're like, what should I even put in one of these? So that's kind of like the meatiest section in here. And then we're gonna do a little section that I'm calling the extras, because they're not really things that are required. I know I personally like to do them though. So yeah, and I think they're really helpful and real fun. They're a little bit more unique. So yeah, another note, try to save your questions for the end of every section. I'll have a little indicator in the corner of the slide that, hey, this is the end of the section. So once I'm done with the slide, feel free to yell questions at me. Also, if you use the Ask Me Anything redeem, I will not lose your question. So if you like think of one and you're worried you're gonna lose it, just go put it in with the Ask Me Anything, and I'll just like go through that at the end of the section. So yeah, I hope that all sounds good for everyone. So let's get started with some other introductory things. So, hello. I'm doing this properly. I went to a presentation about VTubing stuff, and this is the format they had. I was like, that's big brain. Maybe I should do that more often. Like if I do a presentation. So yeah, my name, Daisy-san. I also use Daisy Todd online. I'm kind of in between 2 handles right now. So I guess here's my sort of credentials for why the hell I'm talking about this. I've been VTubing / streaming for 2 years regularly, and on and off before that. I could not tell you how long, quite a bit. I've been playing tabletop RPGs for about 9 years. And during that time, I have played D&D 5e, Pathfinder 1st and 2nd edition, and a teensy bit of Monster of the Week, and various homebrew systems. Most of my experience is in Pathfinder 1st edition, and then I'd say in 5e, and then 2e is like the next one that I have a lot of experience in, but I think I kind of have the best system, like mastery and understanding of Pathfinder 2nd edition. So yeah, so that's how long I've been playing. I've been running tabletop RPGs for about 7 years. That has primarily been Pathfinder 1st edition, and my current campaign is in 2nd edition. I got 4 campaigns under my belt, and I'm currently running my 5th one. So, that's how many session 0s I've done. Hopefully that gives some credit, I guess, some street cred, because I've done a session 0 quite a few times. I know I'm not like the most experienced veteran in the world, but also it's a pain in the ass to go find like a 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐵 or someone to talk to. And why do you want to talk to that stinky old man? I'm just kidding. Gary, I don't know. 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐵 has probably said stupid things. But also, whatever, he gave us D&D. I don't know. Whatever. In addition to my experience playing and running tabletop RPGs, I have written one for one-shots, Alacrity. I've ran about 7 one-shots in it myself, all with pretty positive feedback. The one time that I didn't have good feedback was the one, like one time I made the combat encounter real hard and didn't talk to the players about the nature of that setting. So yeah, various friends have also like run it without me, and with me there. So yeah, I would like to maybe like tidy up Alacrity more in the future because it exists in a Google Doc in its complete form. But if people are interested in playing that, that's a very, very bare bones, like role-playing game, basically built for one-shots. It just takes everything that you don't need and removes, like just yeets it right out there. And it's like, it takes you like 10 minutes maybe to build a character, which is great. It's just made for running on short notice and just getting started super quick. So yeah. Yeah, 𝐷𝐷 has played Alacrity. Yeah, you played one of my, you played in Core of Argos when I ran a game of it. So heck yeah, it's a really good introductory system because you really only need to understand what core ability scores are and like some key terms and how to roll stuff. And then you're just good. Because everything else is just like, okay, DM, just improv that, and it's usually just do it a simple way. But anyway, enough about that. I also have some important disclaimers in here. Hello, this presentation is based off my personal opinions and experiences. I'm not an expert. I don't work for 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐜. I don't work for Wizards of the Coast. I work for me. This is written from the perspective of a GM, but obviously it is useful for players as well, because if you're a player and you start playing in a new group and your DM's about to go and like just start off with session 1, you could be like, hey, we didn't have a session 0. Can we maybe talk about this first, guys? So yeah, it's generally useful. And also if you do have a session 0 and your GM like forgets something, it's helpful for the players to know it too, because then you can just be like, hey, we should talk about this before we start. And it gives you a good idea of like what to bring up with your GM or what questions to ask if they haven't been clarified. So yeah. Disclaimer 2. Why the hell am I doing this? So I started writing this slideshow up closer to the OGL kerfuffle, I'll just say, and I only finished it recently. But there's a lot of folks getting into tabletop RPGs because of the OGL tomfoolery, and they might not be familiar with best practices. So I hope that maybe this can serve as an introduction to said best practices. Best practices. Words. I'm good at them. Also, more importantly, I like tabletop RPGs. I like D&D. I like Pathfinder. I want folks to have a good experience playing, and communicating clearly about your boundaries and preferences is a really, really good way to ensure you have a good experience. It always breaks my damn heart when I hear that people try to tabletop RPG and they won't play them again because they just had a miserable experience because their DM didn't talk to them or the other players were rude, and it makes me sad. And I want people to enjoy this hobby too because it's so good. It's great. It's like, what if live theater met the game of imagination that you play on the playground as an elementary schooler, and you had funny click-clack math rocks to resolve all the other complicated shit as to whether or not your super laser annihilates your friend's freaking crazy diamond armor power. I don't know. I'm just making shit up. But yeah, D&D's freaking great, and I want more people to enjoy it. Okay, this is the last disclaimer slide. And then we're gonna actually get into shit. So real quick, D&D/tabletop RPG, you've heard me say it a whole bunch. It refers to any tabletop role-playing game with similar structure to Dungeons and Dragons in this context. I use the term D&D as a brand, like a generic term most of the time when I'm talking about my game experience playing D&D and saying, oh, I have a game of D&D on Saturday. I actually mean I'm going to play Pathfinder. So just understand that, like, D&D does not mean Wizards of the Coast. D&D all the time. It just is a generic term. It's like Band-Aid. Yes, the Nintendo of tabletop RPGs. Exactly. You get it, Bughouse. Also, I use the term GM and DM pretty interchangeably. It kind of depends whether you have Game Master or Dungeon Master. I think Dungeon Master has fallen out of fashion because it has funny implications, I guess, for people who are too horny or whatever. I don't know. Also, welcome, Bughouse. Last little like term thing. I'm gonna move my phone because it just vibrated. I don't know if you guys heard it, but I'm tossing it straight on the damn bed. Last term thing. When I say like the table, I'm referring to the physical or digital space where you play D&D, whether that is a table in real life that you gather around or a Discord call. It's kind of like when you're in the middle of a session. So the table or mid-session, like when you're actively playing D&D is kind of what that means. So yeah, I hope that's helpful. Also, it's the end of the section. So do people have comments or questions about shit where you're like, hey, why you do that? I also think more GM than DM is more TTRPGs aren't just a dungeon crawl. Yeah. I like Dungeon Master because it's a spooky title. I'm the master of the dungeon. Game Master just feels like I'm a little silly. I'm a silly little guy. I've mastered the game. What game? Don't know. So yeah, that's our last little disclaimer slide. So I'm gonna have a sip of tea and then we'll see if we got any more questions or if we gotta do stuff. Switch between both without rhyme or reason. Yeah, me too. You know, the game, which y'all just like. I can't believe you've done this to me. I can't. How could you? Bughouse, god damn it. I just wanted to have a sip of tea in peace. Christ almighty, something by Ioma Day or whatever the shit. Anyway, I don't think we have any questions on that section. So, oh god, we've hit a sticker party? No, we haven't hit a sticker party. It's just a unicorn. It's just a noisy as shit unicorn. So, let's go into the first section. What is a session 0? This is another obvious as hell one. Oh, hello, Autumn. Welcome. So, I'm just gonna warn you guys that if you put stickers on the stream, you can't read the slides. Just as a heads up. This is a real freaking short session. Or section? Where's hard? My god. So, session 0 is basically to explain the game you're gonna play before you start playing. You're going to be discussing game mechanics, homebrew rules, etc. Establish some expectations socially, discuss characters together, establish boundaries. Does that all make sense to people? Speaking of establishing some expectations socially, please be responsible with the stickers. I will disable them if you guys keep covering slides, just so people know. Is there any questions about what a session 0 is? I tried, like, when I was talking to Emmett about this before I did this, I was like, should I also include like a what a session 0 isn't? But I was also like, it's kind of hard to say what a session 0 isn't other than playing the game. So hopefully that explains it. It's an explanation of what you're going to play before you start playing. It's important. I know for myself in my own format of things, I tend to have a Google Doc that does a lot of the groundwork of a session 0. So yeah. What do you do if you join a campaign partway through and miss the initial session 0? Ooh, that's a very good question. So there's no prescriptive solution or whatever, but ideally your GM would give you any information that would be relevant to session 0. So I hope they had a doc of notes written up, or they have it written up somewhere of, hey, this is all the important shit we need to cover and talk about. If they don't give that to you, please ask them for it. It's very, very important when you go into a campaign to know how you're going to level up. Is it going to be milestones? What do you say when people metagame? You know? So what do you do when you join? Hopefully your GM is accommodating, as like they are sort of the host of your fun time for D&D, and they give you that information. But if they don't, ask them for it. And I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and like maybe this is a controversial opinion, but if you ask a DM for session 0 info when you join a campaign partway through and they won't give it to you, or they don't give it to you, that is kind of a huge red flag to me. Like, people talk about serious shit in D&D, and like, your characters are very personal to you a lot of the time, unless you're playing with a Heartless Dungeon Crawl group, but that's also something you need to know with a session 0. So like, you know, if the DM's not willing to talk to you about that stuff, maybe think about whether or not you want to play in that group. You had an issue with one of the games you're in. Oh no. Oh no. Yeah, that's, oh goodness. I hope that got resolved nicely. Goodness. Yeah. I think, like, I'm trying to think if I've ever had like a session 0 that was a terrible experience. I think I've had session 0s that were generally like disorganized or a little messy, but like none that were like absolutely horrible, or a DM straight up skipped doing a session 0. So there's at least that. Any other questions, y'all, before we sort of hop in to the next section with, I don't remember what it is. If Jim the Adventurer is only expected to last 3 combats and then tossed aside, that is important to know in a dungeon crawl group. Exactly. Exactly. If Jim is supposed to stick around, if Jim is supposed to stick around, you also need to know so that you don't like build something absolutely horrendous and then you're stuck with it. Which ideally, even if you decide you hate your character, your GM will work on you, but yeah. You've not had a bad experience, but Stonecarver had one that didn't session 0 and no one knew the campaign was so much on rails. Oh god, yep, that is the sort of thing that we will get into when it comes to stuff to cover for session 0. So, yeah. I think we're gonna hop into the next session then. So, why should you have a session 0? Also, I'm sorry if this font is unreadable. I never get to use it, and I just really wanted to use it. So why should you, dear viewer, have a session 0? Well, from the horror stories we've already heard from others, you could probably tell why you need to have one. They're not really that much of horror stories, so there's not that many, but you get the point. You get the gist. So, this is another super short section before we get into the meat and potatoes. Why should you have a session 0? 1. It ensures you don't bring up topics that can make your players uncomfortable. It also ensures you, the GM, doesn't end up uncomfortable. Fun fact, the Dungeons & Dragons GM, I don't know why I put Dungeons & Dragons GM in there, but you, the GM, are a player and you deserve to have fun too, so just because your players want to do, like, a freaking crazy thing where they ignore all of the rules, but you there as the GM, you like the rules, that's a thing to talk about. And maybe you guys can meet in the middle, or maybe you talk about that and decide maybe you should find another group. No D&D is better than bad D&D. Always an important thing to remember. Also, another note to this, it's super helpful for players who are less comfortable bringing things up to have a session 0. Hello, hello, Star Dragon. We're at the start of our Session 0 stream. Talking about why you should have a Session 0. Heck yeah. Enjoy your listening in the background and enjoy your work. Hopefully. I hope work isn't too terrible. But, back to this point, re-getting on my train of thought. Important thing for having a Session 0 is it makes it a lot more accessible for players who don't feel comfortable talking about things, like, up front, to talk about the stuff that makes them uncomfortable. Some people are super anxious. Some folks might be neurodivergent. Others might just have trouble speaking up. So having a Session 0 is like a really good dedicated time for people who might struggle but would otherwise enjoy D&D to say, this is what I'm comfortable with, this would be what's most fun for me. So yeah. I also want to make the important note that even if you've already started playing your D&D campaign, you can stop at any time and have a Session 0. Hell, you could have another one if you wanted to. I don't know why you would have another one. Well, maybe you missed some details, but you know, if you had a really thorough one, I don't know why you'd have another one, but you can always have a Session 0, even if you skipped it the first time. So yeah, I think the, like, especially for newer groups, giving people a chance to like talk and get to know each other and what they want to do is super important. I will also say, like, my group is very much like, I know some of my players are very anxious. I know a couple of my players are neurodivergent. I know, like, I've played with other people who have a lot of trouble speaking up for themselves in multiple groups. So it's just super important. Is that, anybody got questions on that? That's the tasty end of the session. I'm sorry if you all hear dog time. That's just how it goes. Bork. Bork indeed. Hey, I'm almost done with my tea. That's actually pretty good. No questions? Yay! Yeah, a lot of this stuff is very much basic stuff, so it's not too terrible. All right. If people have questions, they can go ahead and yell them and I'll get to them at the end of a section. So, let's get into the goddamn meat and potatoes here. The Session 0 checklist. It's very important. This is what the fuck do you actually even talk about on a Session 0. So, to give credit where it is due, a lot of this is sourced from Hayes' Session 0 topic list and guide, which I grabbed from Reddit ages ago. And danger room scenarios are something I've learned about from a Matt Colville video. That's one of the extras. And I think I will also talk about something from Kids on Bikes that I use as like a Session 0 extra that is not linked here, but it is linked on the slide that it comes up. So, credit where it is due. I didn't pioneer all of this information, but if people want it, then they can have it. Otherwise, this is pretty much just based around my own experiences as a GM. So yeah, let's talk about things. So, most boring, basic thing for a Session 0. How are your characters leveling up? Are you playing in a system that even has levels? Because I know Alacrity doesn't. There's like some beta content for leveling up because people complained that there was no leveling up, but that was also people on Reddit that didn't understand the design philosophy. But if you're playing in a system that has levels, are you awarding numerical XP? What actions grant XP, i.e. what is rewarded in game? Do you only get XP for killing monsters? Or do you get XP just for surviving an encounter no matter how you resolve it? It's an important difference. If you're not doing numerical XP and you're doing what's called milestone level ups, so every time you finish a major plot event or encounter, your characters are just awarded a level up. What are some example milestones? So, for example, I have never done numerical XP. I think it's a headache to track, and it's just no fun. And and I want my players to all be the same level. So my milestone level ups, for example, in my current campaign of 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐜 is anytime the players resolve a major arc or like plot conundrum. So usually they will arrive in a town, figure out what the town's thing is that is happening, usually like lately, because they're sort of in the meat and potato, like they're in the thick of a campaign centered around warfare. Usually they arrive in a town that is under control of an enemy faction, and they need to scout the town to figure out what they, like what resources they have, what obstacles are in their way. They need to make a plan to go and take control of the town, and then they have to execute that plan, which almost always involves a boss fight. So once they have done all three of those things successfully, that is when I would award them a level up. Another example is if they are doing a lot of travel from one place to another, I tend to give them a level up for their travel if it was significant. So if they got into a major encounter, or if they did a dungeon along the way, even if it was a small dungeon. So there's some examples for milestone level ups. Another note, when are you leveling up? Does your character level up when you get a long rest, a short rest, when you get to town, the second you get enough XP? That's sort of important. For myself and my group, we tend to find it kind of a pain in the ass to stop and level up your character in the middle of a session. So we tend to level up in between sessions and just start up the next session with a level up character. If I know the players won't get a good chance to, but like say we stopped 3/4 of the way through a boss fight and I know they're gonna get it like done in the next session, I will usually try to tell them, hey, you're gonna level up after you finish this boss fight, so between the end of this session and next session, go ahead and like level up your character and send me your sheet for approval. But don't use it until we finish the like boss fight, basically. I will tell you guys when like the ticker dings over to your next level. So yeah, that's just important stuff about experiences, very basic. Now, here's kind of the more important shit here that can kind of be a little bit more of a mess and requires more thought. Behavior and expectations. So you should think about what your comforts are as a player and a GM about these. Talk openly about your preferences. It just makes stuff easier when you're playing D&D. Should not beat around the bush. Again, for like players who are super anxious or like neurodivergent, some people just avoid all problems until the worst possible situation, or literally will not know there is a problem until you say something. So just be honest and be polite with people when you're talking about this sort of stuff. So important one, are players permitted to be inebriated at your table? Alcohol, drugs, etc. And if you do permit it, what happens when someone is inebriated or arrives inebriated? So, like, say at my table, I ask that folks don't be so inebriated that you can't remember the session. If you are in a state where you're not going to be able to remember or be yourself, don't do it. I'm not comfortable dealing with people who are not 100% themselves at a D&D table. So for me, I'm like, you will be asked to leave and go home and not play that session. But for a group that's playing more casually and they're like, yeah, we're gonna get together and play on a Friday night and everybody's gonna have a couple beers, maybe that's just how it goes. Cell phones and other electronics at the table. This is a little harder because a lot of people are playing online nowadays. But I know if people get super easily distracted, are people okay with there being like phones out all the time at a D&D table and other electronics? You wouldn't think it, but it can get a little stressful when you're doing a combat and you say, okay, Paladin, it's your turn. What are you going to do? And they're busy texting their partner. It's a little frustrating. They go, wait, what? So, you know, if that's something that is like a problem at your table, do consider talking about it, or you're worried about it. Yeah, you definitely know the stress with that one. Yeah. So I know for my players, like, I know myself, I draw as like a sort of fidget. So I'm fine with players doing whatever they need to fidget or maintain their attention, as long as it does not disrupt others and it does not take away from the game from themselves, basically. So as long as you can play your damn character when you have an opportunity to, which, you know, ideally you're interacting during RP scenes as well, not just during combat. But I'm like, do what you need to. Sometimes you just gotta fidget, and that's how it goes. Also, player attention and disruptive topics. Whatchamacallit, from Bughouse. For me, I'm completely fine with people doing whatever, especially during combat, as long as you guys have your turn ready. Exactly. I am very much like that. Like, if you know what you want to do, then yeah, I don't care if you draw or whatever else when it's not your turn. Like, I know, especially in my current campaign, I just ran a combat that had the players like split 5 ways with like 30 different things in combat. So there would be 45 minutes between turns, legitimately. And the players played through maybe like 10 rounds of combat, and it took us 2.5 sessions to do, which ends up being about 10 hours. It took the players 10 hours in real life time to play through what was effectively 1 minute of combat, maybe a little bit more because I waived some of the movement at the start so that people weren't wasting 5 billion turns moving into place. But sometimes that just happens when you run a large scale combat and everybody had fun anyway. So yeah, I know for myself when I am playing, I tend to pay attention for all of combat. But that is because I very much get into the tactical end, and I know if I'm playing a character who is more tactically minded and more tactically involved, I want to keep an eye on whatever is happening. You know, if a sudden like fire erupts off to the side, I need to go, is there a way that my character can solve that effectively, or like, should I stick to my original plan? You know, to use the campaign that I'm currently playing in with 𝐷𝐷𝐾 and Bughouse as an example, both my character and 𝐷𝐷𝐾's character knows haste. So during the first round of combat, I'll probably go, okay, which one of us is going first? Hey, are you casting haste, or should I be casting haste? Okay, we know that. Cool. I'm gonna make sure I'm standing within 30 feet of an enemy to give them a -2. That sort of thing. Or like, oh god, one of our allies suddenly was downed. How can I most effectively get over there? So keeping an eye on like the movement and everything. Anyway, that's kind of a distraction thing. Speaking of player attention and disruptive topics, so sometimes at D&D, people like to talk about stuff that's not D&D, which can be very fun. It varies from group to group. But also some people showed up to play D&D and that is what they would like to do. So kind of talking about how you're gonna rule, like, how much leeway do people have to talk about other stuff? How are you gonna rein it back in? I know in my groups at my table, we basically use a like code word that, which in our case is pineapple, because no one is ever saying pineapple casually in a D&D conversation. So if people are like just going back and forth on a joke and getting super distracted, you know, anyone can call pineapple and we'll go, ah, right, we're here to play D&D. We'll talk about that conversation later. So that's an important thing to talk about. Another important one, unannounced dice rolls and opposed dice rolls. So I will say unannounced dice rolls is definitely a thing that stresses me out as a GM, because that's often paired. Hello, Emmett, your timer's going off.
Oh, shit.
Sorry, I didn't want to make stream listen to your timer. It's also dog time. So I'm just going to wait for the dog to escape. Hello. Man, my VTuber really is just going every time. Oh god. Hello, Autumn. So. Wow, they're really just going. God damn, I'm sorry, I'm just watching my model go. So let's talk about unannounced dice rolls and opposed dice rolls. I know unannounced dice rolls get on my nerves because they are often paired with players making a roll for something that they haven't asked, that I haven't called for them to do. And then they usually make a decision about whether or not they passed or failed with no indication of what the DC was, the dice check, i.e. number you needed to hit to pass. I have absolutely run into players where I describe a room, they suddenly roll a d20, and apparently it was a total of like 8, and they say, I don't see anything in the room. And I said, why? Why did you not see anything in the room? And they said, well, I made a perception check. And I'm like, I didn't ask you to make a perception check. What in the world? So yeah, there's, that. So what does your table do about unannounced dice rolls? Are they okay? Are secret rolls only, are unannounced rolls and secret rolls only okay from the Dungeon Master? I know I'm kind of like, well, I'm the DM, I'm allowed to roll dice when you guys don't expect it. But that's also because I will roll dice for no reason just to strike the fear of God into my players. And also there is opposed dice. Ooh, reconnection successful. Heck yeah, poggers. One moment. I have a thingy for real life. Last you heard was opposed. Okay, let's talk about opposed dice checks. So opposed dice rolls. So what the heck are those? It's when two people roll against each other for something. So usually, I'm sorry, thingy. I'll do that. Sorry, Emmett had a question for me. Okay, that should be handled now. I'm sorry. Jesus Christ, real life things exist and happen. But opposed dice rolls, does your DM permit it? Or is it just something where you're like, no, that's what the person declared they were doing first, so they get to do it? I will say I personally only ever introduce opposed dice rolls if there's like players are competing to do something, and that's also because my group is usually a pretty good sport about it. But if your players are not good sports, or generally like, you know, someone has a sore loser streak, you might want to just say, hey, we're not gonna do any opposed dice rolls against each other where you both roll. We're just gonna use DCs the whole time. So yeah, there's that. Hopefully I've covered that in a manner which makes sense. Here's another big one. PvP, player versus player. Is that permitted at your table? You know, some people play D&D to just relax and have fun, and they don't want to deal with real life conflict. And some people also like take things very, very personally, which is not a bad thing. Caring about your D&D character is good and cool and awesome. But player versus player combat can get very messy very quickly. So, you know, is that a thing that is allowed at your table? If it is, what are the boundaries? How do you bring a stop to player versus player combat when people stop having fun? I will also say, as someone who has largely had a good experience with PvP, in D&D, because usually it's because players did a really interesting heel turn in the final battle. Yeah. some things just they're not great. Also, some systems are just not built for it, even when it is fine. Exactly. Like, is the system okay to do PvP? And I would not suggest doing PvP in a system that is highly lethal. Don't do it. It's bad. That's a route to lose your character. So yeah, it's a mess. But like, PvP can be a very good and very engaging thing sometimes too, when characters have conflicting goals, but that is like, as long as the players are fine with that and they understand I am not going to take any of this personally, and like, you can trust other people to go, no matter how bad this PvP gets, I will not, like, my friend, I'm not going to kill your character as a fellow player. So like, that's something that my group kind of, like, my players have the understanding of. You guys can absolutely fight each other, but don't kill each other's characters. And when somebody's like, okay, I'm done with this PvP, then the PvP is over, and that's all there is to it. So yeah, it's also something very tricky. Like, if you have a caster who knows hold person or something, that can be very interesting for the caster to cast hold person on the barbarian because they want to go and like get revenge on this person who wronged their family. And we're like, no, we can't do this. We're at a diplomatic dinner or something. That can be very interesting. But at the same time, that caster could just go and cast hold person on that barbarian every single time they go into a rage and want to hurt someone that the caster wants alive. So it's very much something that you have to walk a like very tight line doing if your group is okay with it. So yeah, another one. Player character secrets. Is your group okay with keeping secrets from each other's characters? Or are there some things where you're like, please just actually say it? This is something where I'm like, if your character, like me personally, if your character has secrets that are secret to your character, I am going to make an effort to spill them on the floor as a DM. Especially if you were holding on to plot relevant secrets that move the things forward. But if they're just like little things, like nobody can know my character's favorite color is blue, I don't care. That can be your character's secret. I have literally, like, one of my players has a absolute track record for hoarding secrets and hoarding items. So like, me as a GM, I just don't give that player things that I want to go out in the open, or I make sure I have plans in place to make sure that those things get shared. I literally, like, that player had like an item that they snatched during a combat, and that's good. I had an enemy drop that item on purpose because I wanted the players to get it and like learn about that item and go, oh no, this is a piece of this thing that's broken. But also that character that picked it up was holding on to it and it was hiding in their bag and whatever, and the players were trying to have a like conversation about this like relic that they were trying to get, which they didn't know another player had a piece of in their bag. So I was like, oh my goodness, we can't do this. And there was an NPC that's like way stronger than the rest of the party, and I just had their familiar go and, you know, mug the one character when everybody was kind of suspicious that this player had this item that they were trying to talk about and just didn't have it on them because they were trying to keep it secret for whatever reason. So, you know, if you're gonna have PC secrets, can your players be responsible with it? A lot of this, like, for me comes down to, can your players be responsible with this? So, yeah. And that's hard to judge with a new group, so you're always better off erring on the side of caution. It's real important. Another behavior and expectations thing. I didn't expect to spend so damn long on this slide. God damn. Secret responsibility, kids. Exactly. Exactly. A secret in D&D should be something that will be very interesting to the other players when it comes out. So if you just keep that secret forever, it's never going to pay off. Like, you have secrets in D&D so that other people can learn them and find them out, is kind of how I think about them. So yeah. And some secrets you gotta be willing to give and take with them. and figure out what's actually important. So yeah. Shaking Kiva because she has a specific secret I'm waiting for the perfect time to fill. Oh goodness, yeah. Yeah. I feel like I can't keep my damn character secrets because I just, like, I think I might just have, I don't get to play very often, and also, like, the groups that I run with have a record of never asking my characters anything. So it's wild, or I have, like, NPCs that are very obviously have more going on that the players just never ask. So I have a terrible track record with secrets myself. I have to be like, okay, I gotta hold on to this secret. It's gotta stay real quiet. But also I'm like, oh, I want people to know it. Anyway, let's talk about the last bullet point on this slide. What safety tools are you using at your D&D table? So consent checklist, X card, etc. I have a slide dedicated to these, so we'll talk about them in more detail because they're really important. But they're basically stuff like how do players say, hey, I'm not okay with this in your game, and how do they like set their boundaries as players. So that's what safety tools are. Make sure your players know what you're using at your table so that, you know, if you're not using the X card, one of your players who's used to using it doesn't like send you an X randomly and you're like, hey, why'd the fighter just DM me like an X, like short for a kiss? Are they looking for treasure? What? So just make sure you talk about that. Yeah, let's talk about more behavior and expectations. There's so much shit on this, so I might try to go a little bit quicker. So what are the player preferences and goals? What do your players want out of the game, and what does the GM want out of the game? Making sure you guys like all want the same thing out of the game, really important. You know, if your players are here because they want to do a dungeon crawl and your GM is there because they want to tell a very specific linear story with like super engaging role-playing experience, that group is not going to get along or last very long. So that's something very important to talk about. You know, I ask my players up front, like, what is the most enjoyable and important to you, like as a player? Role-playing, puzzles, or combat? And I tend to have my stuff very like mixed together. Usually you're in combat because role-playing has gone awry, or it's a part of a puzzle, but it's super important. Also, saying this up front, if your DM actually wants to tell a very specific story, that's called writing a book, and your DM should be writing a book, not DMing. Just to be super clear, if you're not willing to engage with the interactive part of an interactive game, maybe do something independent. No D&D is better than bad D&D. Another one, player discomfort. That's again, see the consent checklist later. We're going to talk about that more. Player agency. How much agency do your players have over the story, over the game? If you're playing a module, you know, the DM might have to go, or pre-written adventure, the DM might be like, hey, this isn't really in the module, so we're gonna slide back this way because I don't have the time or patience to write this thing because I work a whole bunch. And the players might have to be willing to go, okay, I understand that's not a legitimate thing that we can pursue in this adventure. It's super important up front to go, hey, what is the scope of this game that we're gonna play? Also, game balance. You know, is there gonna be like super powerful challenges that the players like just can't beat and they need to know to run away? Or will things be one? We've reconnected! I don't know how much of my silly singing you all heard. So, okay, game balance. Hopefully y'all heard the other shit for game balance. Keep, I'm going to shake the secrets out of you. Game balance, you know, Is there gonna be super hard challenges? Is there gonna be like, is it gonna be nice and easy because you're just here to have a good time? Will it vary? Is the GM changing anything that affects the game balance? That's massively important. I've been having to think about that a lot. I've been, you know, I've been thinking about running a campaign on a continent where magic doesn't work. And most of the Pathfinder 2nd edition is balanced around magic working, so I have to think about how I'm going to address that. So, yeah. If you build to be 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐬 the Barbarian, who does only combat and the game is supposed to be RP focused or puzzle focused, yeah, you're gonna have a bad time if you do that. So like when I was running my 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐬 campaign, I was like, hey guys, we're gonna be dealing with warfare and whatever. This campaign can either be a shitload of political intrigue and like investigating things and learning about characters, or we can shove you straight on the front lines in combat. It really depends on what you guys want to do, and my players took like the political intrigue route. So that's what we've been doing, and that's why the fucking campaign's been like 40 sessions. So yeah, there's some automatic bonus progress and stuff, which if you want me to send that your way, I think I actually talked to Emmett about that, and that's on my list of things to look at for Crimson Harbinger, just so I don't have to worry about players getting things all like mixed up or not getting magic items. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that. But yeah, also if you're gonna mess with the game balance, is there anything that already exists that you can do to kind of put it back? I'm gonna try to finish this slide. We've got ads in 10 minutes, so I'm gonna try to like get through this slide and then we'll go on an intermission. Another one to cover. Rules debates. How are you resolving rules debates? Are you going to sit there? Is there a designated rules lawyer who knows all of the rules and would like to be able to help sort these debates? If your group doesn't have one, are you just going to say, okay, well, this works well enough for now and we will look it up later? That's usually what my group does. I know for my players, if we really can't find the rule, I tend to go, here are 2 options for what you could roll. Which one would you like better? So I try to give my players some choice in that matter. I also generally like, as long as my players can argue that they could reasonably roll a certain skill for something, I will usually let them do it as long as the explanation makes sense. So yeah, that's important. Spotlight sharing is another very, very important thing, with a session. You know, how are you going to make sure players don't hog the entire spotlight the whole session? If there is a super theater-oriented player, how are you going to make sure that they bring other players in? You know, try not to have a million solo scenes or whatever. Yeah. This is one that I constantly worry about doing too much when I do play, because I do focus super hard on mechanic stuff. Yeah. Rules debates are hard to resolve, man. I think, like, for me, I really am just like, what is the most fun in the moment for the players? And what is the most interesting narratively? You know? If it's more interesting and cooler and helps the players with their overall quest that they were able to pull off that grapple, then I'm probably gonna let something fly. You can only rules lawyer in 5e, yeah. 5e has very, very interpretable rules. So yeah, I will say I sometimes rules lawyer a little bit, but that's usually because I feel like the DM is skipping something that would be beneficial to the player. And I know like I get pretty into like, I've built a whole system for one-shots. I know a little bit about like system balancing and designing systems. I've designed a couple subsystems for Pathfinder 2nd edition. And like adapted a couple things. So I rules lawyer a little bit when I feel like it's not fair to the players. And I try to give my players the same like leeway if I'm doing something that they feel like is unfair. I did design a system for 1E as well. I designed a whole entire overwork system, which I guess could really just be called like burnout or whatever. But that's because I had a character that was super prone to overworking themselves and still is. And I wanted there to be mechanical impetus for it. Impetus, is that the word here? I don't know. I wanted there to be consequences for my character being stupid. Yay! I hope y'all are excited to play with it. It'll be great. So yeah, there's kind of spotlight sharing, I guess, like to actually talk about it a little bit more, or there was rules debates, but talking about spotlight sharing, I know I find it most helpful as a GM to ask the players, hey, is everyone coming along for this? Is there anyone not coming along? That way I can just kind of assume everyone's characters are present and everyone can participate. Or if a scene has been going on for a while, I'll kind of just poke my players and say, hey, is everyone okay with this scene taking like 40 minutes? And most of the time they are, because like our group knows each other and we've all like hung out in real life and been playing together for like 4+ years. But, you know, sometimes it's just not fun and there's no way to get involved and you need to go, okay, can y'all finish this scene outside of the table or write it down or bring a quick wrap to it so that other people can play D&D because it's a group game. So yeah, there's kind of spotlight sharing. I know as a DM, I just try to get as many players as possible involved in a scene just to sort of minimize how much work I actually need to do for spotlight sharing stuff. Meta knowledge and metagaming. Let's talk about that real quick. So that's when people are using knowledge from outside the game, inside the actual game, which can be very not fun because maybe your players know that the vizier is evil and he is planning to kill the king, but your characters have no evidence for such. So it's really weird if your character walks around threatening the vizier. So how are you going to deal with that? One of the groups that I play in also uses a sort of like code word kind of similar to pineapple, which is bird noises, because people also don't say bird noises when they're playing Dungeons and Dragons, weirdly enough. And people are like, oh, okay, that's the signal to go, oh shit, I'm metagaming. Let me like tap the brakes a little bit. 𝐶𝐞𝐫, exactly. Bird noises. That's a good one. That's a good one that I learned from y'all, and I want to incorporate it into my future session zeros. So yeah, another one is min-maxing your character. How well optimized is your character expected to be? You know, are you playing in a campaign setting where your GM is willing to work around poorly optimized characters? You know, I don't expect my players to be super well balanced. I don't ask my players to have a good party comp. You know, one of my players is a psychopath and wanted to play a Eldritch Trickster rogue in Pathfinder 2nd edition, and I said, are you sure? I've heard a lot of people say it's not good, and they said, I'm sure, so I said, okay. You managed to handle playing a Magus in 1st edition, how bad could it be? Which we've now learned was a terrible idea. But yeah, you can min-max a character to save your life. Yeah, sometimes it's not fun, it's not what people want to do, and it's hard to get a unique character out. So, you know, how much are you going to cater to that? I know I have some players that love min-maxing, so I know that they have a more powerful character, which means I'm going to have the boss slap them more often than the bard who's not very min-maxed or anything. You know, that's just how important is it? Is your GM going to work around it? Another one, character party fit. Min-maxing can also be fun when your character has a specific flaw. Exactly. Exactly. If they have a thing that they're very, very bad at, it's great. But character party fit. You know, how is your character gonna like fit in with this party? How do they get along? You know, do you let people play the lone wolf character with the expectation that they will try to come along eventually? Or do you kind of require that everyone says, yes, we are in the Fellowship of the Ring. We are all going to go help Frodo go bring the ring to Mount Doom. You know, nobody is going to go out here and play like a super selfish character because that's not what we're doing. So it's kind of a, what are you okay with for your characters fitting into the campaign? I usually give my players like a, this is what your overall quest will be, and your character has to have a reason to pursue that quest. I don't set any, like, I don't generally set a specific rule of you have to play a good character, you have to play a nice character. I'm just like, you have to be willing to take this initial quest, or you need a reason that your character will be at this initial event to get wrapped up in the adventure. Otherwise, go for it. Have fun. Another important one on this slide. Does your GM permit murder hobos? Are you allowed to play a character who just runs around murdering people they dislike and murdering them? Would this also fit the roles discussion? I think that would. That would also fit the roles discussion, you know. Are you going to expect your DM to, like, does your DM expect you to have a dedicated caster, a dedicated blaster, a dedicated tank, a dedicated librarian, all that sort of stuff? So that can also be a conversation if you guys want to make sure you have, like, the good party balance where everyone has everything covered, or the DM's like, no, I'll just work around it. If you guys have no rogues, I'll make sure there's a rogue NPC with you, or you never have to sneak. You know, that sort of thing. That's important. Also, yeah, murder hobos. Are you allowed to play murder hobo? Most of the time, I'm just like, no, not unless your character arc is becoming not a murder hobo. That's for me. And as well, is there any other behavior rules or preferences that you have at your table? You know, is there anything else that you really want people to know? Also, we have like 2 seconds till ads start. So we're gonna do an intermission, or if your character ends in prison / dead. Yeah, that too. So I'm gonna go and put us on an intermission because we really pushed it on the ads limit here. I'll see y'all in a teensy little itty bitty bit. Hello! Hello, friends! We return. Let me catch up on chat a wee bit. So, god damn it, the hello team. I'm not used to that one. Still, I never will be. But yeah, I want to mention the
house says hello.
Of course. God damn it. The character party fit is also a good mention for the roles discussion. Like, I know we talked about it a little bit, when I want to address it in slightly more detail. Like, you know, are you okay with, like, is your DM, another important note for that, is your character okay with, or is your DM okay with everyone playing a rogue? Or there being 5 billion rogues in a party, or there being 2, or maybe there's 2 Maguses, you know. So, you know, it's important to go, is that going to be fun as well? Because I know most of the time I don't care in my campaign, because most of the time when there's, like, duplicate classes or whatever, players have built different enough flavor. Oh my goodness. There's some mad thunder around here. I don't know if you guys can hear that at all. Who would have 2 Magi in their party? Yeah, I don't know. Look, Sad and K and I didn't talk to each other at all about, who our backup characters would be. I just said, I would like to play a Magus again. It would be fun. And then I went, how do I build millions knives from Trigun in Pathfinder? And that's how I ended up with my disaster man. But yeah, so that's important. Also, like, murder hobos, if your character arc ends up in prison / dead, yeah, if you're gonna play a character that's a murder hobo, be okay with that. You had an instance where you pissed people off by playing a duplicate class and you got so afraid of it ever since. Oh no! I love Killian and Ifera, and I love that they're friends now. Exactly! Exactly. This is the nice thing, is, like, most of the time if there's gonna be duplicate classes or, like, overlap in the character party fit, you can talk to your players and say, hey, what is going to be the specialty of your build? Because most of the time you can specialize a build a whole bunch. So, you know, Farah's very, very good at, like, doing a whole lot of burst damage, cough cough, intensified shock and grasp, whereas Killian can walk in and intimidate anyone within 30 feet, and also he has 10 foot of reach without doing anything, because he fights with a reach weapon. You know, he can just maximize his damage because of the subclass that he is. So yeah. Like Farah, who he scared the shit out of. Exactly. Look, Killian didn't land any hits on Farah, but he did scare the hell out of him. So yeah. That's important. Talking about character party fit. But let's hop back into this. Also, we might run a little overtime. If we need to cover shit. I'll just do another intermission in an hour if it's needed, because ads exist. But I'm having fun covering this, and I'm on my break time, so whatever. I'm gonna ramble about D&D for as long as I want. Alright. Now that we're done with player expectations, I can't believe Fiona lasted longer against Farah than Killian. To be fair, I did dump my first action to do a full round intimidation action against a single opponent, which I didn't need to do. That was also me not knowing how to play my fucking character. Yay! People like watching streams. You're here to listen to D&D for 12 plus hours. Good lord. Good lord. I don't know if I could ramble about D&D for 12 plus hours, but you know what? Fair enough. Let's talk about the Game Master in session 0. Yeah, I trust that Bughouse would. He's a psychopath. You know, when you're having a session 0, you probably want to tell your players your style of GMing. You know, how much do you lean rule of cool? How much do you like the rules? It's a good thing to tell your players. It's very important. Stream stickers, shut up. We're not doing stickers right now. So that's important. How do you handle player absences? What do you do when a player's not there? Does your character just, like, Blair Witch in the corner? Do they glitch out? Do you, as the GM, play their character? Do you try to come up with a narrative excuse that they're not there? I know I will try my best to come up with a narrative excuse that your player, do they get picked up by a bird? Exactly, that's very important. If there's a big metal bird that comes in every single time there's a player missing and kidnaps the player, that's a very important thing for the GM to tell you. Or not tell you that specific one because it's just funny. That's just a pleasant surprise. So yeah, like I know myself, I will try to write something interesting into player absences, but also if I don't have long enough notice and there's not a convenient enough thing, then I'm not going to put the effort into it. Usually your character is going to get conked in the head or used as an example by a very powerful baddie. You're the bird that kidnaps missing players and sets them back gently at the next session. Emmett?
What?
Emmett, just so you know, Grand Theft Autumn is the bird.
Oh no!
Is the Valeron bird.
Oh no!
There you go. Star Dragon. In my Star Wars game, absent players go into catatonic force trance and they are designated the new house plant. Fucking amazing. Christ. Christ almighty. My players, I will say, I do hand wave people being absent and like transporting them. So like my players usually take the absent player that has been knocked unconscious somehow by a falling stalactite or stray brick or a coconut or whatever. They usually get put in the bag of holding with their head sticking out so they can breathe, but the players can just carry them around with no problems. And last time that happened, that was actually kind of funny because the party's like 6-foot tall monk got put into the bag of holding and like just described himself like absolutely like climbing out and everything and just flinging like the contents of the bag everywhere. So it can also make for some funny moments. But actual player narrative authority. How much authority do your players have over the narrative? If you're running a pre-written module, that answer might be very little. If you as a DM are like, hey, these are plot things that are going to happen, you are going to lose this boss fight, that's a thing that your players should know. You know? I know for, like, myself, I don't, like, my players have very little, like, restrictions on what they can and can't do. It literally is a, like, don't make other people not have fun. If we're playing a freeform campaign or a module, exactly. That's also, like, something to say up front. So, yeah. If you have any pet peeves as a dungeon master, if there is a thing that you do not enjoy it when players do it, just tell them up front so they can try not to do it. I know for myself, I get a little annoyed when someone has a really elaborate plan for their turn and they're like, I'm going to use an item, and they haven't double checked what they needed to do to use that item. Or we're 30 sessions in and somebody doesn't know what kind of action it is to cast one of their spells that they've cast every single combat. I get a little annoyed with players not learning their characters when we're very deep into the campaign. So that might be something that, like, I would make sure to include in a future session 0. I get annoyed if people miss every other session. And that's mostly just because I'm like, I put in a lot of work and I don't want to come up with excuses as to why your character's not there. Please just show up. We're all adults. You can make your schedule. But that's like, that's me. That's my dumb pet peeves. You might have different ones, which is why you should tell your players that at a session 0. Behold the amazing transition that I did. All right. Here comes the heavy part of a session 0. Ethics and sensitive topics. So, as a heads up, this session is going to discuss mature topics. Not in great detail, obviously, but they will be mentioned. If this something is not for you right now, or you are in a place where you don't have earbuds, you might want to head out for a bit and go do something else, or go get your earbuds, or turn the volume down and turn the captions on. That sort of thing. So, super important thing. The RPG consent checklist slide is in this section. I promise. Okay? We're gonna We're gonna talk about that. It's important and cool and good. Fill out an RPG consent checklist. They're very easy and helpful. We're gonna go over them soon. But they're very good ways to like just very quickly list off to your DM, I hate spiders. Do not put spiders in here. I have a fear of the deep. Do not put very deep oceans in here. Or like, I hate needles. Please don't put them in. They're very upsetting. Or I have that fear of repeating holes. Don't go Google that one. That one's miserable. Hello, 𝐶𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐿. Welcome. This is, boy howdy, this is a topic to raid on. Anyway, welcome. I hope you had a good stream, 𝐶𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐿. What are you up to? And welcome to the stream where I talk about a session 0, and hello. This is a hell of a time to raid because we're talking about ethics and sensitive topics that you should go over at a session 0. So, hello, I'm going to give this disclaimer again to raiders. We're gonna discuss mature topics. If that thing is not for you right now, welcome raider. I'm not offended if you leave because we're talking about serious shit in D&D. But otherwise, if you're willing to stay, welcome. Hello. I hope your stream was well, 𝐶𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐿. Come hang out if these things are not upsetting to you and you want to talk about them. Hello, I was trying tabletop RPG characters. Sorry for coming in at a potentially bad time. It's all right. I forgot that there's a setting that I could turn on to like disallow raids for a little bit. I just wanted to make sure I gave people like a good heads up, just so they weren't coming from like happy times or whatever to, hello, we need to discuss how prevalent horror is in your tabletop role-playing games. So, you know, that's important. It's okay. You're a-okay. Again, I'm not mad if people are like, okay, I'm peacing out. But if this is for you, you can absolutely stay. So, I hope your stream was a good old time. And also, oh, you know what I forgot? I must shout out 𝐶𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐿. If y'all are not following 𝐶𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐿, go do it. 𝐶𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐿 is an awesome freaking artist. Go do it. They're so cool. I promise. They got cool characters. Okay? It's important. It's very important that you go follow them and support them. Oh god, hydrate. Hydrate is important. Screams into the void. Exactly. That's important things to do on a stream with 𝐶𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐿. So yeah, I'm gonna hydrate. Thank you for the reminder, 𝐶𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐿. Wait, Autumn. Shit. I'm good at using my brain. I promise. I'm gonna hydrate as well. Exactly. Everybody needs to hydrate. Okay, I've gotten a sip of water. All right, people have had sufficient warning. We're gonna dive back into the ethics and sensitive topics. So thing to talk about with your players at session 0. How prevalent are the following in your game? Please be upfront with your players. They're very important things. Is gender and sexuality a thing that's going to come up? Are there going to be characters that are homophobic or anything like that? Talk about it. How much horror will be in your games? I'll also like go through and be like, oh, hey, here's stuff in my game like gender and sexuality. I'm like, that is not a thing that is going to come up or ever be a problem. I have made it an anomaly to be homophobic in my D&D setting. The vast majority of people are fine with any sort of gender or sexuality. And that's like, you know, that's a small thing that I'm like, I don't want to run that. I don't want to run that at my, like, tabletop game. You know, I think the only character that exists that I know of in my setting that is homophobic is a backstory character that one of my players put in. And that was a thing that, like, I told them, like, hey, this isn't going to be a prevalent thing because I'm not comfortable running an NPC that's homophobic. If it exists at all, it's going to be heavily, heavily veiled. And, like, the large majority of my players are some sort of queer, so we're just like, no, we're gonna have fun going on adventures. We're not going to also fight for a right to exist in our, like, Saturday night fun times, you know? How prevalent is horror in your games? You know, is it just going to be a fun, silly time, or can the players expect to have to delve into spooky dungeons and deal with eldritch terrors? Are there going to be, like, big, scary eyeballs or existential dread? That sort of thing. I know with my players, I'm going to have to be, like, super upfront in the future, and, like, my group is cool and likes horror, and they've played for me before, but somehow I always have eldritch horror in my games. I don't know how it happens, it just always does. So I just have to go, hey, by the way, guys, we're probably going to deal with cosmic horror in this campaign, somehow, at least briefly. It will exist. So that's just something. Shadowy eyeballs that scream as a small treat. Exactly. You know, what's a D&D game without a little horror is where I'm at. I love being scared with my consent. Sadly gonna raid and run because it's getting close to your usual bedtime. That's a-okay, Cat and Wad. Get some sleep, get some rest. Thank you again so much for raiding. And yeah, have a good, lovely night. And again, if people aren't following Cat and Wad, go do it. Cat and Wad's awesome. So heck yeah, have a good time and bye-bye. Autumn, give the cosmic horror. Exactly. You know, some people are like, yes, I want the cosmic horror. Other people are like, no, I do not want to do that. Alrighty. Another one to talk about how prevalent are relationships of all stripes in your game. Is character relationships going to be an important thing, whether they're romantic, platonic, or purely just sexual? You know, what is the importance there? You know, I don't tend to, like, the last one on that list doesn't tend to come up in my games, if at all. And the second one on that list is usually very important because there are various characters that care a lot for each other. And the first one is usually there's a couple characters that are very much driven by their romantic affection for someone. Also, I don't know, I wouldn't know anything about playing a character that's driven largely for their romantic and platonic affections for people. What? I don't know what you mean. So yeah, that's important to talk about. Also, what social and cultural issues are going to exist in your game? Both setting-specific ones and things that mirror those in real life. Is there any good old fantasy discrimination happening in your setting? That's something that you should be aware of. And if you're playing D&D with people who do not look like you in any sort of way, you need to be aware of that and be very courteous to people. It's super duper important because those people will have a bad experience with D&D and go, I don't think I want to play this anymore. And it's like, that's not a great time. So yeah, and also, like, if things come up during the campaign, that's also important to talk about. I had this horrible run with my campaign Brass, Coin, and Blood, and then I also had it happen with 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐜, so we have a running gag in my group that I somehow managed to predict horrible events with my campaign plots. But I was running Brass, Coin, and Blood, and that was the first campaign that I introduced the Pale Hollow in, which was a magical plague. And we started playing that campaign shortly before the coronavirus pandemic started. So, you know, that was a little awkward. And I went, hey guys, are you okay? Are you still having fun? I could, like, figure something else out to be, like, the main plot focus. And thankfully people were like, yeah, okay, that's fine. And then it happened again in Brass, Coin, and Blood, where they were gonna go to the big capital city that, you know, was in a little bit of an authoritarian police state. You know, which was a plot thing that I'd already set up and foreshadowed shortly before the George Floyd protests happened. And I was like, hey guys, I didn't mean to put police brutality in. Like, I didn't mean it to be a topical thing that exists. I did mean to put it in, but I didn't think it would be something we would be actively, like, talking about outside of D&D. Are y'all okay? It's background radiation here. But the players are like, yes, we're fine. But goddammit, how did you do it again, Daisy? And then it happened again with 𝐃𝐲𝐬𝐬. I started the 𝐃𝐲𝐬𝐬 campaign, and then the goddamn war in Ukraine started. I'm like, why? Why does this happen to me? I need to make a D&D. The conclusion has been drawn that I need to make a D&D campaign where nothing bad happens whatsoever, and then things will be fine. So, you know, it's important to talk about social and cultural. Yeah, the Apollo dodgeball. I have the Apollo dodgeball meme just constantly happening whenever I run a D&D campaign, and it's the worst. So, you know, talk about social and cultural issues, especially as they come up. So yeah, make a D&D game where I get $1 million. I wonder what horrible thing will be the tail end of your next game, given what I know about it. I will be absolutely delighted if we find out that vampires are real, but I will also be horribly, horribly depressed if we suddenly, like, lose all electricity and, like, power or whatever, since magic doesn't exist in that one. Anyway, my god. Last little bit of, like, sensitive topics to make sure you talk about. Make sure you talk about how prevalent mental and physical health issues are going to be in your game. You know, if you're playing a campaign in a setting that is recently recovered from a war, will the players be dealing with characters who suffer from PTSD? And how heavily will they be dealing with that? That's a very important thing to talk about. Or if there is any sort of, like, family history that's uncomfortable to, like, deal with. Is that going to be a thing that's prevalent in your game, or are you going to have to hand wave it, or be willing to, like, not hand wave, but go, hey, that's not going to be at a forefront of the game, or be willing to, like, cut an end to a scene. We had that come up in the last session that I ran of 𝐃𝐲𝐬𝐬. A character basically, like, committed matricide and was talking about it afterwards, and another player was like, hey, I'm not cool with this. So we put a stop to that scene, and I said, you know, if you guys want to talk about it and finish that conversation out of game, away from the table, you can do that. But for now, we're going to move on to what you guys do next. So that's very important stuff. And also why you talk to your players about, like, if you're not okay with a thing, just say something. So yeah, there's ethics and sensitive topics. It's very heavy and important. We're gonna finally talk about the damn RPG consent checklist. All right, I'm getting a link to it. That's not it. That's not it at all. If people need the RPG consent checklist, you can get it at that link that I just posted in chat. So let's talk about it. What is it? It's basically just a list that you can hand to your DM. Just say, these are the things I am okay with. These are the things I might be okay with in some contexts. And these are the things that you should please never, ever, ever bring up. They're deeply upsetting to me and very icky. So as a GM, you should also talk about your boundaries. You deserve to have fun too. So, like, I will tell my players up front, hey, this is a thing that I will not run. Do not bring it to my table. If you put it in your backstory, I'm going to mostly ignore it. Like, a lot of the time, if one of my players has a character that is abusive in their backstory, I might have to go, and I have gone. I am not comfortable playing an NPC or running an NPC that is abusive. If they are on screen and doing this, I will be toning it back a lot. And that player is just gonna have to be okay with it, or we're gonna have to figure something else out, because, you know, I'm the GM, I have to run the game. So that's sort of the important thing with an RPG consent checklist. The GM should also probably think about it and look at it. Another important thing to, like, go over on here is the rating of the game, or rating of the campaign. if this game were a movie, its rating would be, and a lot of people have a really good understanding of like movie ratings and a really good feel, so that is a very good metric for your campaign. Like a lot of my D&D campaigns end up being R-rated, and that's just because we deal with shit. We deal with shit like family trauma and horror and a lot of war crimes recently and dog napping. So like that's something where like I know I'm never gonna do a live play of my games because my players like to run a slightly grittier game and I like to run a slightly grittier game, and that's just good for everyone to be on the same page. So yeah, another one to talk about, I sort of like talked about it a little bit, but the different comfort levels on the RPG consent checklist. So there is green, that is enthusiastic consent, bring it on. That is you telling your DM, I'm fine with this. If you mark green for bugs, you're like, yes, throw as many spooky centipedes at me as you want. If you mark green for blood, throw as much blood on my character as you want. I do not care. If you mark yellow to harm to animals, it means it's okay if it's veiled or off stage. It might be okay on stage, but requires discussion ahead of time or you're otherwise uncertain. So, you know, if you're like, I don't think I'm okay with seeing a like character that is a child harmed, I've like, it might be okay for an NPC to say, you know, this evil vizier threatened the very young prince and put a blade up to his throat. It might be okay to say that in your game, if someone marked that as yellow, but it would not be cool to put the players in that active hostage situation, for example. And maybe someone marks marks rats as a red. They're like, please don't put rats in my game. I don't like it. I don't care how long we are on this boat. I don't care that we are in like the plague era. No rats. Don't like them. They're horrible and icky. And like as a GM, you know, if you planned on running a campaign centered around rats, you might need to talk to that player and say, this game was kind of centered around rats. Are you sure you want to play? Or if rats aren't important to your game, you just go, okay, rats no longer exist. Not necessarily don't exist, but like they're not going to come up. So that's important. Another very important one is to add topics that you expect to come up as a GM. So once again, to use my own campaign as an example, I am running a campaign set in the rats are raccoons now. Exactly. That's how it goes. I'm running a game that is in a country that is frequently in war. It is like roughly inspired by the Warring States era Japan time period in real life. So I had to be like, there will be active war. There will be like everything associated with war has the potential to come up. Like I literally told my players at the start of this campaign, the Geneva Convention has not been invented yet. It is perfectly legal for people to use alchemist fire napalm, and it's perfectly normal. You know, I haven't described that sort of thing in a lot of detail, but you know, players have had to walk by field hospitals, or their characters who have decent healing skills like actively make the decision to go to a field hospital and help heal the wounded. And I don't describe that in a lot of detail, but that's a thing that you can presume exists after every single major conflict. So, you know, war crimes. I also told my players up front, there are child soldiers in this setting. And that was something that, like, people were very much like a yellow on, like harm to children and child soldiers. So it was like, this is not going to come up. And the group ended up being like okay with that as a major narrative point when it came up later, because it had enough narrative build up. Because one of the characters' kids got kidnapped by an enemy faction and was basically under the threat of being turned into a child soldier via spooky, icky, gross magic. And I double checked with the players, like, hey, these are the stakes here, but if you guys are genuinely not okay with this, I will make sure that this does not happen to this character. This will not be on the table for them to not survive this event. And all the players just went, no, make these stakes very real. And I was like, okay, if you guys say so. And it ended up being fine and good. So yeah, every time, I would say also like a good practice, this is less a session 0 thing, but a good practice as a DM is if you expect something very sensitive to come up in a session, if you know it's upcoming, talk to your players out of game, talk to them to the like at the end of a session if you know it's coming up the next time, and be like, hey, this might come up next session, or this is going to come up next session. How does everyone feel about it? Because maybe someone's opinions have changed since they filled out a consent checklist. It's just important and good to double check. So yeah, I did a double, yeah, check-ins don't have to be limited to a session 0. Exactly. Again, I'm gonna use 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐜 as an example because it's my active campaign. The players are going to be dealing with a character that very much wants to kill one of their other NPCs, and they know that that character has a weapon that can, like, immediately down their character if it lands a critical hit. And it can, like, disarm them in one hit. Like, I say disarm, I mean, like, literally, like, a character could lose a limb in one hit. So I talked to them, and, like, I just had everyone tell me, how much bodily harm are you okay with happening to your character? Are you like, I'm okay with them losing a couple limbs, but please don't kill them? Or are you like, if they die, they die? Or, please God, I like both of my characters' hands to be intact? Like, I get it. If people are like, no, I'm playing D&D to have fun, and I do not want to roleplay my character losing a limb, that's fine. I'm just gonna make sure your character just, I'm gonna have that character not shoot you with the funny delete your limb gun, you know? I don't need to worry about a narrative explanation because we're here to have fun. So yeah, it's sort of a important thing with the RPG consent checklist. Go do it. Go use it. It's good for you. It's very fun. We're on to another section. We're gonna talk about character creation. There's a couple sections to this one. So when you're making your character for session 0, some campaigns will have you like already show up with a character. Sometimes everyone builds a character all together. That's usually something a DM will tell you from the outset. Oh, thank you so much for the follow, Darius. Welcome. I hope you have a lovely time and it's good to see ya. So when you are building your character, does the GM have any questions for the players? What do you need to know about player characters? I usually ask my players for like, what was your character's occupation before they got on this adventure? Do they have any like living connections that they care about? Who are people that they care about? Which totally isn't, because that's very convenient kidnapping fodder later. But, you know, important stuff like that. Why are they on this quest? What is the most important thing to them in their life? Again, for the 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐜 campaign, the players are playing in a setting where war is very common, and I asked that their character is a part of one of the major factions. I said, you're not allowed to play a neutral party in this. Your character has to have an opinion on the major conflict. And every single faction has characters carry a will of some sort on them. So I asked everyone to write out their character's will, which is like very serious. What I didn't tell the players is that everyone was going to read their will to the rest of the group at session 0, which was a very fun way to basically give people an idea of this is what this character is all about. And also my group is very good at not metagaming, which is why I did that with them. But it's important. What does the GM need to know about your character? When you're making a character, what are the things with the stats? Are you rolling dice? Are you following the rules from the book? Are you going to be playing in a game that has higher stats? So maybe you should be rolling more dice for a higher average, Or is everyone going to take a, like, spread? Or is there going to be, like, point buy? There's all sorts of different ways to build your character's core stats, if your game even has core stats. So make sure you talk about that. Another important one to talk about is alignment. Oh boy, this can of worms. You know, your DM should tell you if you're okay with, if they're okay with people playing evil characters. You know, do you need approval to play a chaotic character or a true neutral character? Because boy howdy, there's a reason that the groups that I run in have a nickname for the chaotic neutral alignment as chaotic stupid. Because that's usually the character, that's usually in, like, the groups that I've run with, that's usually been an indicator for a murder hobo. Which is not fun. Most of the time. You can make most things interesting in D&D, but it's just hard to when you're inexperienced. Yes, chaotic stupid, exactly. I know I don't use alignment that heavily in my games, and I mean, I'm running Pathfinder 2nd edition, which is going to be getting rid of alignment. I have to know a person for a while before I allow someone alignments, exactly. And that's the sort of thing, like, I'll say up front, when I was building Killian, my backup character, I really could not see him as a definitely good character. So he is chaotic neutral on paper. But it's very much something where I asked the DM, I asked Bughouse, hey, is it okay if Killian is chaotic neutral? Because he's a dick most of the time. But when the rubber hits the road, he is good. So, you know, he will do what is good if it is truly, truly important. But otherwise, he's going to be a petty pain in the ass. So it's like sometimes this is where alignment starts to fall apart because I'm like, this character is chaotic neutral leaning good. And like how much I even use alignment, literally Emmett's character in my 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐵 campaign doesn't even have an actual alignment. He literally wrote chaotic insecure for his character's alignment. And I'm like, no, that's a valid answer in my campaign because I'm not gonna use it. Chaotic neutral murder hobo is uninspired. Chaotic neutral characters should fill bathhouses with alcohol. Exactly. Also question, does your game even consider / have alignment? Exactly. It's very important. Like, if you're gonna play a campaign where you're all hunting vampires or whatever, and you're all holy warriors, then yeah, alignment's gonna be important. But otherwise, it's kind of like, you know, it's a suggestion. So, important to talk about that can of worms for session 0. If there's any other character creation rules, which is kind of what like the rest of these fall under, your DM should also be presenting those to you. Are there permitted ancestries, heritage / races / classes? Is there any specifics to those in my setting or in your game? Is there anything that's prohibited? You know, I had to tell my players, for the 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐵 campaign, it's mostly tieflings and orcs here. There are kitsune, there are catfolk as well. If you want to play an elf, you're probably going to be an outsider or your family has to have moved here. So that's important to consider. Or if there's just something that is like not on the table. So like most of the time I don't consider Dwergar to be playable in my setting because they're very, very, very rare and very, very reclusive. But if a player talked to me, I might be persuaded. Also, as a GM, this is not written here, but you know, what are your hard limits on character creation? Would you permit something if a player could explain it to you well enough? Because that's kind of where I fall. You know, if you can justify why your character is this way, and it's interesting and it works with the game, then I'm inclined to go, yeah, go for it. If you're like, I just want to play a crazy plant man, who hates fire, in a place that in a desert and you're like, I want to be a jungle plant, I'll be like, why? That doesn't fit. Explain. How did you get here? And if they're like, I simply will not, then I will be like, then you simply will not play that character. So, you know, important thing to consider. Also, how much tweaking / reflavoring do you permit? Lol, does your world even have a race? Lol, there's one orc in 𝐏𝐻𝐻 now, so hopefully it's that player. Exactly! Exactly, that's very important. The game that I play, the 𝐏𝐻𝐻, there were no orcs. And then there was a one-shot where some meddling happened, and now there is one orc in the setting. Because a random character swapped places with someone's previous character that happened to be an orc. So, yeah. There is one orc now. And maybe there will be one half orc in the future. I don't know. Anyway. So, that's important. I know for, like, tweaking or reflavoring classes, you know, can someone change their fire damage to cold damage, per se, if they want to play a sorcerer that is, like, frost and ice themed? And there's just a lot more fire spells, so it's easier to be like, okay, I'm gonna take Fireball and we're gonna reflavor it as, like, an exploding frost blast. Or, you know, maybe you have a character that struggles with, like, some evil corruption or whatever, and some of their spells don't work correctly, so they look a little different. So that's stuff to talk about with your DM. This kind of came up before. What type of game are you running? Sandbox, railroad, something in the middle? If you guys are running a railroad and it's fully a combat slog, you probably don't want to build a librarian or a face, because you're probably not going to need a face in a dungeon if you're here to, like, kill orcs and sling dice and loot treasure. That's all there is to it. Another one to talk about, campaign length. How long do you expect the campaign to be? I will say, as a DM, I think it's perfectly fine to answer this with as long as it needs to be. Ooh, sodium acetate, hot ice, that's a good one. You know, for me, I'm like, the campaign is as long as it needs to be. I have an end in mind, but it will take however long it takes you guys to get there. It should not take 5 billion years, though. So, you know, or if you're like, hey, we're playing for the summer during the duration of camp, this will be 12 sessions. That's important. Also being consistent about what it is. If you tell your players something, i.e. if you say it's open, but then you actually just railroad them, or at least have a conversation if things change. Exactly. That's very important. Communication! All of this comes down to communication is important. Talk to your players. Please, just do it. It's not as scary. You're all here to have fun. It's good and important to do. So, yeah. Adventurers, politics, and factions. Also another thing to consider when you're creating your character. How are adventurers viewed in the setting? Is your character part of any of the local politics? Are they on any factions? Do any of those factions absolutely hate each other? Those are things to consider. I'm also, like, as a DM, I'm perfectly fine with my players inventing factions. I don't like writing all of the logistics of factions, so if you make one up, that's less work for me. Alright, GM is sick of your crap, here's Cthulhu and Power Armor, roll initiative. Bitches, yeah, sometimes that just happens. I will say I had a campaign that this is not the most graceful way to end it, but I didn't get to pick my players at all. And it was just not a fun time because, like, nobody was interested in RPing or doing anything slightly serious. That I just threw them into a boss fight unexpectedly, and whoops, that was the end of the campaign. Your characters are lost in the ethereal plane after being defeated by Haster, because no one can defeat Haster. And I will say that was a stupid way to end a campaign. That was very bad of me to do. Hopefully I don't do that again. Half-orcs maybe. Depends on if Emmett wants that to happen. That's fair enough. That's fair enough. I will say I did talk to Emmett. If Emmett does play Throck, we might make Throck getting transported between like worlds slightly canon. We might make it canon happening, and he would have just managed to make it back. I think we talked about that. We talked about that after the one shot that unfortunately that character does a few things. The character might get yoinked back by a god or something. But anyway, goodness. Character context. That's another important one for character creation. What should people's characters already know? Hello! If you're playing a 1,000-year-old character, what historical events has your character lived through or experienced? That is important things to know. If there's anything at all weird and atypical about your setting, that's shit you need to tell people about building their character. And this is why the timeline exists now. I know. Yeah, I have an absolutely miserable timeline for my setting. That like I cover it, but I go by country because multiple things were happening in multiple countries in my campaign setting. So I have 3 separate timelines that are like, they're all happening at the same time. I just have them separated by region because it's just goofy like that. It's purely for Tiernan. Look, you made a race that can live for 1,000 years, and I said, how old can I make my character? I want this man to be ready to kick the bucket at any second. Separate timelines. Are you trying to drive yourself insane? It's not like actual like separate timeline things. It's that I wrote them out separately because it's easier to comprehend them if they're all listed out by region. So yeah, it's important to talk about. Also, is there prohibited content in your game? You know, I'm probably going to look at my players who want to play an Eldritch Trickster rogue in the future and say, please don't do that. Please don't do that. They're not implemented very well. They're very underpowered. They're not balanced good. Don't play an Eldritch Trickster rogue. Have you considered just being a caster or a rogue with a dedication of the opposite class that you'd like? That might be more useful for you. So, you know, that's important to talk about. Along with if there's any homebrew content that you have available for your players, you should have that available for them to look at when they're building their character. So yeah. Oh my god, we are going to be going for a while for this because we got 8 minutes left till ads. Let's talk about more character creation shit. Backgrounds, feats, and mounts. What kind of character backgrounds are you okay with people having? What kind of feats are they okay with happening? Are there any feats that you award for free? That's also important to write down. Is there anything that you waive or you're a stickler about? You know, I am a stickler about quick draw because the action economy is very important and very well balanced in my campaign. I know it's slightly annoying, but I'm gonna be a stickler about it because there are characters who have quick draw because it's important to them. So yeah, feat taxes in 1E, exactly. Like, you know, your game, you award people weapon finesse for free because you just don't want to have to worry about getting weapon finesse. It's just a pain in the ass. So, you know, that's important to talk about. And I sort of touched on it, general mechanics. Is there anything that you homebrew? So like when I started running 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐜, I told my players, hey, I might, instead of doing like 80 points of damage to you, I might elect to award you the wounded condition instead. Is that okay with people? Because then that's not chunking out of their hit points. Their character can still keep moving and everything. They just have a bit of a debuff instead that represents that damage. So, you know, important things to talk about. How do you handle repeated rolls and skill dogpiling? Dogpiling? I don't know why I put this in the character creation section. I'm gonna be straight with you guys, which I know is nigh impossible for me, but I'm trying real hard here. You know, is everybody allowed to roll for this? Is it just a couple? Or, you know, after you've already determined the result, do you let people roll for it? Can people just keep making thievery checks if there's only one rogue in the party? you know, how is that handled? So it's a good way to sort of decide. Usually for me, like if you're having one person repeatedly roll, I'll be like, hey, is there something else you can roll, something else you can do to help yourself do this? Because if you keep doing it, you're gonna get diminishing returns, basically. It's like how I run that. Oh goodness, that's a very big wall of text. Do like to make sure I throw information at my players about things that may be happening in the rest of the world if they enter town and people are celebrating. When a player asks why this is, and they say, have you not heard, friend? Lord has defeated Frostbar in the Battle of Dunscourt. Players say who defeated who and the what. Now, exactly, yeah. It's the sort of thing of like why you have to know stuff. So letting people know stuff like that is good, important to have written up. Another one with character creation. This is important for people who want to play characters that get into crafting. How much downtime will there be? Do you give people a chance to at all? Is it something you're willing to accommodate if people are okay with it? So, yeah. I used to run games, and I generally run games that have very little downtime because my players are generally not interested in crafting, like that I have run for. But if somebody was super into it, I'd be like, yeah, okay, we can like take a couple days or slow things down a little bit more. So that's important to talk about. We've also got inspiration and hero points or / hero points. So a lot of people know what these are. These are usually points that you can use to sort of like help your character do extraordinary things or re-roll something. Or in the case of Pathfinder, you can spend all of them to come back from dying, which is like super cool. So saying, hey, this is what I award inspiration for, and this is what you can use them for, especially if you have any homebrewed uses of them. They can be sort of written up so your players can account for that. So yeah, there's that. I think since we have an ad in 4 minutes, how much do we have left? Okay. This is the last little thing on this section before we get into any specifics. So what I think we're going to do is we're going to cover this slide, and then if people have questions, they can submit them via the Ask Me Anything while we're on like a little ad break. And then I'll cover the extras, and then we'll be done. Sound good, y'all? That's gonna be my plan, because we got 3.5 minutes till ads. So last little thing on the sort of the checklist of setting / campaign specific stuff. General categories that are really good to have a like general write-up I've found for players, especially if you're gonna like run a one-shot in a pre-established setting. This kind of goes into like what Brown mentioned. How does magic work in your setting? Is it weird if you're a non-divine caster? 𝐏𝐢𝐬𝐉? I don't know, Cloud. Hello. Like, you know, how does magic work in your setting? Is there magic? What's the tech level of the place you're going to be adventuring in? Hello! Welcome. We're going to be going on a break soon, so I'm trying to get through this slide. You know, what's the tech level for your fantasy setting is important to talk about, so the players know whether or not they should have a gun, or if they can expect to fight people who happen to have guns. It's just important to talk about. You know, I told the 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐸 players, hey, guns do exist, but they are exceedingly rare here. I should have a gun. I don't trust you with a gun, Cloud. To be clear, I don't trust you with one. Also, what are the current politics / factions? Again, we talked about like background that characters should know. Who's in charge right now? That's very important to know. Is there any social faux pas that you shouldn't commit? Speaking of etiquette, does your setting have certain etiquette characters should be mindful of? You know, in 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐸, I use the actual Japanese honorifics a little bit, and I introduced a third one to serve as like a gender neutral pronouns. So, you know, I explained to players, hey, it is standard to introduce yourself with these, is like, that's a shorthand way of saying what's your character's pronouns? Because I wanted that to be a normal thing in the setting. And I explained to them, hey, not using an honorific if you're close to the person shows that you're very close to them. Not using an honorific when you are on bad terms with them is super disrespectful. So that's something that characters can pay attention to know what an NPC thinks of another character. And also to convey what they think of another character when they're communicating with another character. So that's also important. Also paying attention to physics too. If something can't happen in real life and it can happen in your world, exactly. That is also a very big one to talk about. You know, people can walk near fucking lava in my setting. We have video game lava, and that's just how it is. Fiona should have a gun. Nisha deserves a gun. Cloud's in charge. What the hell? You people. We're gonna go on a gosh dang ad break. If anybody has questions about the big old checklist, now is the time to throw them in to the chat, because we're gonna go on a goddamn ad break so that I can drink some water, and then we're gonna finish the rest of this goddamn presentation, which is almost done, I promise. I'll see y'all in a wee little bit. Alrighty then. Hello everyone. Ads are over. The countdown timer's done. We're gonna get back to goddamn work. Hello. I'm completely neutral on a Jimmy Buffett fact because I'm doing a thing, and also I left the fan on. Turn the fan off. That's important. Turn the gosh dang fan off. So cool. Nobody seems to have questions. That's good. I covered a lot of shit. Jimmy Buffett's buffet themed restaurant. The drinks use a vodka called Deep Eddy. Huh. Okay then. What a fact. Anyway, my god. Let's talk about D&D. This is the last goddamn section. Trying to think of questions, but you feel like you covered everything really well. That's good. That's good. I always forgot that people having questions is a, you know, if people not having questions is a good sign that you covered everything, I guess. So there's at least that. Let's talk about some extra shit for session 0 that you're not really required to do. I like to do it though. It's just good and fun. These are more fun than the other like dry, boring shit. But the other dry, boring shit is also just as important to talk about with your players. So let's do it. So, a fun little thing that I like to establish at the start of the campaign is character relations. Basically, you just establish how player characters know each other or something about their relationships. Kids on Bikes has an awesome part of their character creation where one at a time, each player chooses another player character at the table that they have a positive relationship with. They then pick or roll on a table to define something about that relationship. Then they do the same thing with a different PC with a negative relationship instead. So basically at the start of the game, that has everyone started off knowing, like, I'm on particularly good terms with one other player character and not so great terms with one other player character. Also, I have a link to the rules for the Ashcan version of Kids on Bikes here. This is available like for free. It was part of the Kids on Bikes Kickstarter. But let me see if I have the table there. I don't have the table there. So I'm gonna pull up the Ashcan rules with the table. So basically, let me skip through this. I've never actually played Kids on Bikes, but these are really fun. So for a character you know with a positive relationship, they got a list 1 through 20, so you could either roll on a table or just pick off of it if you already know something. So for example, to once again use my 𝐃𝐲𝐬 players as an example, I'm actually not going to. I'm going to just pick something random. Say you roll on the table, and for a positive relationship, you pick the other paladin character, and it's a, what is your private nickname for this character and why? So maybe your character nicknamed the paladin Ol' Slicey Shoppy, and they did that because they had an axe and they saw this character just wield it super duper well. Or maybe you just nickname the person Slicey or something because that's shorter. And then that can be an established thing. That can be an established thing about your character. That like it's a sort of like nice nickname that you have for that person because your character admires that thing about them, like how well they wield this axe. You could also do something like inverted with that. That's like your character gives everyone like derogatory nicknames, not necessarily derogatory in a genuinely rude way, but your character gives everyone nicknames because they don't respect them yet. So, you know, once that's sort of like a fun indicator for your character as to whether or not they actually respect the other person, as to whether or not they'll use the other player characters' names. Yes, Seneca saying Killian. That's exactly where I pulled it from. So, you know, Killian had no respect for Arturus, another character in our campaign, because Killian is chaotic neutral and has no respect for authority, and Arturus was an officer on the ship who found out about Killian's, like, little stowaway private base. So Killian just kept calling Arturus Narc the entire time, right up to, like, Arturus leaving the campaign. Also, yeah, whiskey and salad, derogatory. He didn't come up with that nickname. He calls Farah Great Boy. He probably actually does use Farah's name at this point, though, because Farah kicked his ass once, and he went, no, he's competent. He used to call the captain of our ship Needle Noggin. But, you know, there's something, like, that you can do for establishing a thing about the character. Needle Noggin was very good. I did steal Needle Noggin from Trigun, I will say. But then you get into, you have to pick a player character that your character is not on good terms with. So for example, what do you need to take from this character for their own good? So, you know, maybe a character has something that they lean on or something, or they have, like, a blade that they're antsy to get into a fight, and your character just thinks they can't handle that. Tiernan with work. Yeah. So you could pick another, this is a thing of you pick another thing for that player character. Also, another fun one. What was this character's role in the worst day of your life? You know, maybe your character's worst day of their life was that their house burnt down and they lost their parents during that event, and your character was the EMT that pulled them from their room. That's like a really hardcore, like, meta, like, really intense thing to do. But yeah, these are really fun to establish things about your character relationships. You know, there was one, like, how does your character, like, what debt do you owe this character and why? That came up in the 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐜 campaign, because Kay's character had basically, Kay had helped heal a party member when they were younger, and didn't ask them why, even though it was because they stole something. Didn't ask any questions about their wounds, and they had, like, a history, basically, of Kay taking care of this character's wounds and never asking more questions about it, which that character greatly appreciated because they needed that privacy. They were stealing to get by, or I don't think it was actually to get by, but it was because it was an old habit that was ingrained in them. It's very fun. So yeah, these are very good and cool. So whether you're gonna run a Kids on Bikes game or not, I highly recommend using these. They're very fun ways to have your characters, like, know each other. So yeah, go do it. I posted a link to it in chat. I really like them. Also, sorry, Bughouse, I had to terrorize you with old Slicey Choppy. I was legally required to. Also, you guys are right. You should remove work from Tiernan, probably. He probably needs something else to busy himself with, though. So, here's the end of the very last section. My God. So another fun and important thing, I guess less important, but still good to do, especially if you're going to play a new, like, system, is to run a practice combat or danger room scenario with your players. Something I've played with is having players come up with 2 true rumors and 1 false rumor that I distribute at random. That's a very good one. I'm writing that one down. 2 true rumors and 1 false rumor. I'm stealing that. I'm stealing that, Star Dragon. That's very good. I want it. It's mine. Anyway, back to fucking danger room scenarios. Whatchamacallit. So, you can do this as soon as your players have your party has their characters built. Basically, a danger room scenario is a practice combat that has no impact on the rest of the campaign. It's completely non-canon, and the purpose of it is to allow players to practice with their characters and get familiar with how the rest of the system works. So like, I know it wasn't necessarily a danger room scenario, but me doing a practice combat playing Killian against 𝐷𝐷𝐾's backup character Pharah was very good, because I realized that, yeah, no, the character I was playing was a lot more multiple ability dependent than I realized, and I really shouldn't have put any points in charisma, and I shouldn't be starting a combat against a single opponent using a full round action that's meant as like an AoE. Like, there was just a whole lot of tactical shit that I was like, oh no, this guy doesn't work how I thought he would. So like, that's where it's handy, like if you're a more experienced player playing a new class, learning how to do that is very good. And if you're playing a new system, it lets people learn how their character works. You know, if you're playing Pathfinder 2nd edition for the first time, it can be a little nerve-wracking to learn during a boss battle that haste only gives you an extra action that can only be used for striding or striking. You know, so learning that in a practice combat is a really good way to do that. Another important thing to test with danger room combats is to give the players a variety of threats to deal with as a DM. So you should really, like, this is the sort of combat encounter where you actually do want to throw the entire kitchen sink at them. You know, you're gonna want to make sure they know how to make death saves if their characters, God forbid, go down. You're gonna want to make sure they know how to apply conditions to their character or are vaguely familiar with how they work. Make sure they know how their spells work. Make sure they understand their class-specific mechanics. I learned by playing Killian and building Killian that I had been running Maguses wrong. Magi, my entire time running first edition up until that point. Or things like not knowing how your barbarian rage works or how your bardic inspiration works. That's why we do a danger room, so that your players can get some good old practice in. So yeah, that's the end of that gosh dang section. And that's all I got for you there, immense snookers. Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, that's all I got for everyone. Y'all got any funky questions? Y'all got like, hey, what about this situation for session 0? Or could you go over that thing again? Yeah, I can ramble about those. I will say I would love to do more like TTRPG Basics sort of streams, is kind of what I called this. So if people want more of those and have specific topics that they want, feel free to also yell at me for those. If you're like, I would like you to info dump about this specific D&D thing for 2 hours, that's also a valid thing that you can yell at me. This came about because I learned that people in my server did not know what a session 0 was and had been playing for like a decade and had never done a session 0. And I was like, what? Crimes? Puzzles? Oh god, puzzles is one to consider. What about puzzles specifically? So dump about your blorbos. But puzzles would actually be good though. Yeah, how do you make a good puzzle? Or gameplay types? Yeah, I think it's like a whole 2 hours on puzzles might be much, but different gameplay types and handling that might be important. Campaign prep. Ooh. Campaign prep might be good because I'm in the midst of doing campaign prep, so I might kind of be able to gather live notes while I do that. Are we talking like prep before a campaign, like before you start running, or like individual session prep? Out of curiosity. I'm just sort of curious, like as far as specifics go. I definitely want to do stuff that is system agnostic. Here, hilariously bad at pre-campaign prep and session prep. Both. Okay, no, fair enough. Both is a valid answer. I will say I also feel like I'm refining my process slowly. So I'll figure it out. I've like my first time using anything like loot list or a campaign wiki was for the 𝐏𝐢𝐩 campaign. And I'm like, no, actually, I see how much more useful this is than giving your players a Google Drive link and saying, sift through these documents. I'm a, yeah, solid okay at one-shots. That's fair. Yeah, I don't like running silly one-shots too much. What is important? World building between writing a lore book and building for campaign. Ooh, important world building. That's very good. And I can say, the very short answer that's too vague to that is anything you expect your players to touch. But you really want to do a longer campaign. That's fair. That's fair. I think I got thrown in headfirst into DMing a longer campaign because my first ever group imploded after the DM had us get into a combat that was intended to end as a TPK and didn't tell us that. And then that DM did more stupid out-of-game real-life things that we all said, none of us would like to talk to you anymore. We're going to play D&D over here in our own sandbox. So that's how I got thrown headfirst into DMing, because we needed one. And I was like, yeah, I could do this. The one shot that I ran went well. And I had ran a couple one-shots like in middle school before that. So I was like, yeah, fuck it. Why not? I could do that. And my first campaign was a goddamn disaster. I'm glad my players had fun at least. All right. So we got gameplay types, which is also going to include puzzles. That might actually be fun. I have a very specific approach to puzzles that I like to call the lava bridge. And I can elaborate on that. I want to run in the world y'all played in with Max and pals. Yeah, that was a very cool looking world. That would be a very cool one to play in, at least briefly, because I know I tend to like my campaigns a little less silly. But also I'm guessing that one shot was probably an anomaly because I was playing a Goliath with a bowling ball. Okay, so campaign prep. I didn't write that. I'm gonna write session. So session/campaign prep is another idea that people want to talk about, and important role building, you know, versus writing a lore book and building for a campaign. Yeah, I'm gonna take a little screenshot of that because that one's kind of complicated and I need the full context of it there for me to actually remember that it exists. Let me just copy that and then I'll just paste it in Discord for later for me to look at a later date. Also, goddamn, that thunder is just going. There's potential for serious shit in that world for sure. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I think that's all people got. I got 3 things that I can think about rambling on. That's super cool. Let me go into chatting. For gameplay types, I guess the difference between Rails/module, sandbox, dungeon delvers, intrigue, and the like. Oh, no, that's completely fair. I was thinking of moment-to-moment, like, gameplay in games. That's a good clarification there. Because I was thinking, like, combat versus RP versus puzzles. That's a very different one. And I will say, I don't know if I'd be an authority on that because I've never run Rails/module campaign types. Yeah, fair enough. Sandbox, dungeon delvers, intrigue, and the like. Yeah, I don't think I've run a lot of very different types of campaigns. I'm like, you're going on a grand adventure. There will be dungeons. There will be dragons. That's all I promise for you. But yeah, no, that's important to think about. I do like the idea of talking about puzzles versus combat versus RP though. I want to talk about the lava bridge, but also I don't think that's a whole entire stream. I'll talk about the lava bridge very quickly. I have a philosophy for building puzzles. and other like combats, like legit. Okay, that's also a good idea. The collapsing lava bridge is a classic puzzle that I throw at my players, a Daisy classic, and I come up with no solution for it because the answer is whatever the fuck the players come up with is correct. As long as they can reasonably, like, explain it and make the dice checks, I will help them make it happen. And it sounds like a weird philosophy because it sounds like, oh, well, maybe what if they just try to run across the bridge super fast? That's a valid solution. That's what they do in a lot of things. What if they go and they use a, like, oh my goodness, collapsible pole or 10-foot pole to go and like poke at it and some of the bridge runs out and that's how they figure it out. Or they have to go and like figure out how to fly across it or like throw a grappling hook or whatever. Then yeah, Minecraft water bucket. Exactly. This is what I mean. The lava bridge. It's a good philosophy for problems. And part of why I like doing that, like for throwing encounters or puzzles at the party, like generally, unless I throw a very easy puzzle at a party, is because it prevents me as the DM from like defining one correct answer and then only letting them use that correct answer. Because I have absolutely run into DMs who did that. Cough, cough, my first ever game that totally imploded. Like our DM expected us to use a grappling hook in a specific way, but the puzzle didn't work because the DM did not understand how drawbridges worked, and we had to physically make a diagram of the drawbridge and how it worked, for them to understand why our solution would have worked. So yeah, and also like you can then prep a couple solutions to maybe help the players out if they can't come up with anything. Spicy pineapple is a terrible lollipop flavor. Good to know. So yeah, I guess there's the lava bridge. That's not a thing that merits a whole entire stream. I just wanted to talk about it. Goodness. Anyway, I should probably do stream wrap up shit since we've been here for a whole extra half hour. I know some of you would listen to 12 hours of things. Oh, just recent, we had a puzzle where the players had to pose in a specific way without any actual real indication in setting that was needed to get out. Good Lord! That's a mess. That's a terrible, terrible mess. No! That's not fun at all. 𝐏𝐢𝐻 Yeah, that does not. This is why I lava bridge my puzzles. Literally, I think the only reason I did a puzzle in a recent one-shot that was put the lava in the bucket, put the lava in the well, fill it, was because I gave enough hints. I knew there was enough hints that somebody was gonna get it eventually. And then Dakota got made fun of out of character for even doing it even though it worked. What the hell? That's mean. I'm gonna shake your group. I'm gonna go kick the door down and shake someone. That's not good. Sorry, I was actually cracking my knuckles. I don't know if people heard that. D&D is fun and cool and people should be nice. God damn it. So, Christ, on that note of why we need to have a session 0 and why people should learn how to DM in a good, fun, considerate way and actually learn about game design because it's not that different from D&D. My God, thank you everyone for attending me info dumping about dungeon mastering. As always, I wrote a couple topics down to consider and work on for the future. But if you have more D&D stuff to ask me to do like informational stuff about, you know, you can ask me about it. You might kill your bird next session. That is unfortunate. Also, we're wrapping up stream. I'm sorry if I don't engage with that too much. So yeah, thank you to everyone who came to hang out for this. If you're not following and you'd like to, you can. We're working towards a little follower goal. 200 followers would be fun, would be cool. I also have a Discord server if you want to hang out and talk about more D&D shit or talk about art shit or just bother me about streams we're doing a series of fantasy movie streams starting this Friday. So this Friday, we're doing a little screening of The Wizard of Oz, if you want to hang out. And we're just gonna go all the way through up until December, which is gonna be super fun. So yeah, next stream will be next Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're to be back at it with Kirby. Boy howdy, I hope you're all ready for me to bash my head against the wall with that. Hopefully that'll be fun. I don't know why I'm still on the gameplay screen. I should be on the chatting screen. What's wrong with me? I don't know why I did that. So yeah, thank y'all for coming. It was real fun. We're not gonna do a raid today because I went overtime and I want to rest and go get a cup of tea for my poor little throat. And I want to just vibe and draw silly stuff and maybe enjoy the thunderstorm that you guys might be able to hear some of. So yeah, thank you so much again to everyone for coming to stream. This was very fun. Thank you for letting me all yell about D&D. So yeah, I'll see y'all later. Bye-bye.